there's a question. You should go.
Questions allowed? Since Fan mentioned certain works that are as good or better than the source material, that brings up a question for me. How do you guys feel about fan fiction of fan fiction? If you take a fan work and use the scenario or the characterizations that happen in it to create your own work.
Personally?
Let's talk about verses.
Do you have to get express permission? Is it any less legitimate than the original fanfic?
There's always been a sort of a hesitancy about that, and I think the idea is that the people within fandom are in a community together, so there's been a different kind of respect for the material. For me personally, anything I've created is up for grabs. If somebody wants to use a character I've created, a scenario I've created, if they want to remix something, I have no concern about stopping them. Let them. If I hear about it, great. That's nice, because then I'll link to it. I mean, I get a lot of letters from people from other countries, from China, from Russia, from Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, asking if they can translate my stuff into their languages, and I say yes every time. I just want to link, so I link to those.
I've seen some fanfiction authors saying no translating without expressing.
Yeah, but you can't do anything about it. Somebody asked me to do a translation. I say yes. 20 minutes later, they write back and go, "Here's the link." So they've clearly done it already. Yeah. So people are going to do what they're going to do. It's just like we're going to do what we're going to do, whether the pro authors grant permission or not. People want to express their thoughts about the source material that they read, things that they're interested in. We're going to express our ideas one way or another.
I would feel like the biggest hypocrite in the world if I told somebody they couldn't fanfic my fanfic. I'd like to know about it. I mean, if they want to tell me about it, that's great. If they don't, fine. I have a blanket permission for translation and podfics. I do have people who email me and say, "Can I translate this? Can I podfic this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Just tell me where it's at so I can link it." But really, they don't even have to tell me. I just give blanket permission for it. So,
when I started my webcomic, I had a girl go, "Is it okay if I write a fanfic about?" I'm like, "Go!" Like, because I want to check that off my webcomic artist bingo card. I got fanfic, I got fan art, I got an angry comment telling me how bad my anatomy is. I don't know.
I do think that attribution is important. I mean, just like we're giving the credit to the source material, I do think if you're going to fanfic somebody's stuff or you're going to podfic it or translate it, you should give attribution.
It's nice.
I mean, you shouldn't claim it as your own, basically. So that's my one caveat.
I've had people fan art my fan art. Like, they've asked permission because I do a lot of digital paintings, and then they're like, "Oh, can I paint this like in real paint?" I'm like, "All right, yeah." I think most people just do it for practice, and sometimes it comes out really nicely, and they ask a lot of people ask me if they can post it. I'm like, just go ahead, it's fine, as long as you, like you said, as long as credit is nice, but I don't even expect it because it's like the internet, and sometimes people like find my picture on Google and they don't know who did it or whatever, and they it's fine. They're just practicing.
Passing something off as your own work is a different situation. I mean, in my real life, I teach lit at a university, and so dealing with plagiarism issues and things like that with the students, it's a concern. But even there, I'm not going to pursue it. If somebody takes one of my stories and says, "Oh, I wrote it," it's like, be happy. If you're happy about people going, "That was funny," great.
I actually had a issue come up last year where somebody, I had about 5 people email me and say, somebody for this one fest, it was a Glee Fest, which was, they wrote Kurt and, Dave, I think. And they had taken the beginning of one of my stories and basically rewritten it. And I was kind of like, okay, but they gave me credit for it. So I was like, I really don't care. They gave me credit. They rewrote it enough. Well, fine. I didn't want to go to the hassle of making them take it down.
Right.
One of the things that just got brought up, which was the question I was going to bring up, was about practice. And this is something which I hear often brought up in fan circles, the idea of practice or whatever. I think there's also a question about sort of community and a built-in community for your work and people who will critique you. Would you guys like to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's another way in which...
Like using fan works as practice for...
And as things that people will actually look at, unlike the novel in the shoebox under your
Right.
bed, right?
Yeah, I love the shoebox.
You mentioned the community aspect of it, and I think, you know, if you are writing your own, say, original novel, you have to get people on board to invest their time in learning the universe or learning the characterization or whatever. But if you're writing for Harry Potter, you've got a whole audience of people who are already like
Really
ready
interested.
with that information and want to know what you're going to do with those characters. So that's great. And on the point of you know, practice, I don't know if this is exactly what you were talking about, but like I started copying pictures out of Sailor Moon, you know, comic books, and I'm sure some of the greatest, you know, contemporary comic artists today, I'm sure they drew pictures of Superman when they were little, and I'm sure they were awful. You know, you gotta start it at some place, and you know, whether fan fiction or original work, you gotta write bad books first. You gotta draw bad pictures first. So.
I mean, I wrote Star Trek. This is how old I am. It was still on the air, the original. When I was a child, I wrote myself into Star Trek scenarios when I was 9 or 10 years old, 8 or 9 years old. You know, as people did, and it was what's called in fandoms drawer fic. You know, because it never came out of the drawer. But I don't know if I've improved since then.
I can tell you I did. My first drawer fic was a Mary Sue in the X-Files, and she had like hair that was different colors and eyes that were different colors, which I managed to make the hair happen, but not
But it is nice though. It is nice to have a community of people willing to read it. You know, in the same way that tech stuff is beta tested, our editors are beta readers. You know, we call them beta readers because they're sort of second people to take a look at stuff. And it's great to have people who are as well versed, if not more so, in the canon than you are, you know, to look at your work.
I actually have a question based on that idea of writing yourself into the canon. So I'm thinking about this question of women writing themselves into fandom where there aren't a lot of female characters, and not necessarily as women. I mean, you know, also this question of whether you think there's any reception there or any practice there that you had starting that way. I mean, it doesn't have to be necessary, but do you think that influenced at all how you found the idea of trying to find yourself in the narrative?
Probably not for me. I mean, no, there were enough things that were, the books I read when I was a kid, even the bad Heinlein juveniles, you know, that had enough girl protagonists to make me happy when I was 12 or 13. You know, but everybody does it. Gene Roddenberry, how many Gary Stews does he have? You know, he has certainly Wesley Crusher was him. Certainly Tom Parrish was him. You know, Paris was him. He had a number of people. He just threw himself into the Star Trek universe. Why should we be any different?
Do we have to clarify terms Mary Sue, Gary Stu for anybody here? Yes. Okay. So someone want to take a better stab at that, or should I just do it?
A Mary Sue would be a self-insert of the writer into the story. Usually as a female character, obviously the name Mary Sue. Gary Stu would be the same thing. It's the character who is always great at what
Perfect
they do.
in
They're
every
everyone
way.
loves them. Everyone loves them.
And
They often die tragically.
either they get together with a character or they get the characters you want to get together.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's total self-fulfillment, self-insert.
It's major
There,
fantasy.
and you look, and you know, other people look at them and
And it's often the first thing people
Yeah.
write. A lot of the fanfiction.net writers, especially the very young ones, 12 and 13-year-olds, their first stories were often a girl from America transfers to Hogwarts, and she gets to know Harry, and she has all these secret powers that nobody else has.
she's half
and there's a-
unicorn, half vampire,
unicorn, right,
half Pegasus, half hippogriff.
and everyone loves her,
Right.
and she kills Voldemort.
I guess just to build on that question, as someone that's outside the community and doesn't know very much about it, the impression that I got before the last 2 days where I've learned a lot is that fan fiction is, pornography is not the right word, but
Sometimes it's the right word.
girls kind of living out their Harry Potter fantasy or their Twilight fantasy or whatever. How much of that is actually in the community?
Let me crunch some numbers.
It's like, I think that a lot of the general public thinks that that's what fan fiction
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, because that's the sexy thing to do in newspaper articles. You know, when people write about fan fiction these days, that's what they talk about. They talk about the erotica. They quote from usually bad erotica.
Yes.
And there's certainly a lot of it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's certainly a lot of that within fandom, but it's not all by any stretch of the imagination. There are a lot of people who go through their entire fanish careers writing what's called general audience stuff. Sometimes, you know,
And they get less
high-rated-
hits.
Yeah. And a lot of what the fan artists do isn't erotic at all. It's portraits of people, you know, or
Yeah, I
it's
don't think
character
I
stuff.
can't do erotic. I feel like I'd be embarrassed, like for me, but like I would love to look at other people's erotic. But like if I was drawing it, I'd be like, I gotta stop. I can't do it.
I can't write sex scenes. It's really bad. And when I try,
But
it's
you know, like
terrible.
I feel I don't know. It's just, I'm like blushing already.
Well, I'm
This is the Rule 34 thing. This is Stargate Atlantis as Girl Scout cookies. That's part of why
right,
the Rule
yeah.
34 thing happened on the panel. It's not so much because there's so much porn, it's that the porn is often with weird things, which is great.
I think it's
In
become
my
like
mind, I
a
think it's
joke
great.
now. Like people just want to Rule 34. They do like Internet Explorer and Firefox. Like I've read that story, you know.
Personally, my favorite thing was God, what was it? The fan, you know, the fan pink guy, blue guy, the fan website that was run by the dude who was trying to come in and steal all of our shit, and then they had those terrible
Oh, FanLib?
FanLib, the FanLib,
yes.
pink guy, blue guy. We could talk about FanLib.
Yeah.
We could do that. But we have questions.
well,
Oh, she had.
I just wanted to make one more comment about the erotica writing. I'm one of the fan writers who usually ranks their fic as R or NC-17, which means there is some sexual content in it. But I write like literally 50 to 60,000 words fics, and there may be like 2,000 words of erotica in it. That's it. It's like writing a romance novel is
Yeah.
the equivalent.
You know, some people will just scroll to that part,
Yeah,
read it,
exactly.
and then they'll just close it.
A lot of people now are saying, I scroll past all the sex in the fics.
That's right.
Because
Sometimes, yeah, I
You
do
know
that
what?
too.
Beth? I'm not gonna knock PWP. That's called plot. What plot?
Or porn without plot.
Porn without plot, yeah.
I read a ton of it. I read a ton of it.
Yeah.
When you said, you know, it's sensational to write about the erotic stuff, it's also sensational to talk about women and sexuality.
Yes.
Women have sexuality. Women like sex. Like that's crazy.
Well, that's why
You
it's
know?
50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
There's this, you know, massive trilogy, which is a lot of porn. I mean, that's if you don't know that, it's a big bestseller right now, but it's also a Twilight fanfic. And it had serial numbers filed off and rewritten to be an original story, but it isn't. It's Twilight fan fiction, and it's very porny, and it's very popular. And it's become a big thing in the press because it's like, oh, women are writing about sex. Well, yes, just like they always have.
And you're like,
hello.
And fandom is a really safe space for
Yeah.
women to discuss sexuality, to try on different sexual selves through writing. When I came into fandom, into the Harry Potter fandom 10 years ago, I was just starting to come out as queer. Now I'm pretty much open about it, but it was having that safe space where I could explore that and, you know, take on the sexuality that I was able to feel like I could come out to everyone.
Well, and there's very few other spaces. I mean, like when I first started in the Harry Potter fandom, which was actually even before you, I think.
Yeah.
There was still this question in it because it was sort of what some people call a feral fandom, meaning that people were like, I like Harry Potter, let's go on the internet and see what we can do, yay! You know, instead of having been in other fandoms before. So there was this big question about whether /fan fiction was going to be okay in Harry Potter, and it's one of the few internet spaces where very quickly it became clear that not only was /fan fiction going to be okay, we were going to talk about it, and we were going to make sure everybody thought it was okay, and the people who didn't think that gayness was okay were going to be sort of off in a little corner. And I've never been in another internet space where that has sort of happened that wasn't explicitly a queer space initially,
And I will
right?
say, to her credit, I mean, there are things to be wary about where J.K. Rowling is concerned, but to her credit, she has been quite encouraging over the years of fan creators, of fan writers, of fan artists. She linked back in the early days on her website to fiction archives, including ones that had /, which a lot of writers will pull back from. You know, like George Lucas is notorious for saying, oh, it's fine if people write fan fiction, but it has to be PG or under, and it can't have sex, and it can't have
There's
this,
no
it can't
gay
have that.
people in the future
Yeah, see
universe.
what happens when you tell fan fiction writers what they can write.
Yeah, but she was pretty supportive of that. The only caveat I think she included was if you were going to write NC-17 stuff, could you lock it down, password protect it?
Yep.
And most people once upon a time, say yes.
Now no longer.
And don't send it to me.
Yeah, and don't send it.
Yeah.
Because all the writers
They
want that.
will mail her their fanfics.
Oh, well, there is the Fred and George picture.
Oh, that picture, oh my god.
What?
Oh, those poor children.
You be very careful with Google, okay?
No, I knew it was going to be this picture. This is a real,
Yeah.
yeah. People shouldn't show their twincest fanfic to the actors who were involved because that was a really, really horrible thing. When this happened, like,
They approached them at a convention.
they showed them
Right.
it, everybody in the fan community flipped the fuck out on the person who did it because that's just not fair to the actor. Anyway,
Funny.
their faces say it all.